Welcome to the Monopoly Mindset, the podcast where we uncover the strategies to build your real estate portfolio one property at a time.
We're your hosts, Tyler and Tommy, here to share our story of playing real-life Monopoly.
Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned investor, this is your go-to resource for mastering the real estate game.
So grab your board, roll the dice, and let's buy Boardwalk together.
Welcome to the Monopoly Mindset with Tommy Stelzer and Tyler Brown. We're starting a podcast that we're really excited about, talking about real estate and trying to help encourage newer investors or first-time investors to get started.
Yeah, how's everybody doing? Tommy's been trying to get me to do a podcast for a really long time. I was pretty reluctant, but now that I have a little bit more experience in the real estate realm, I think it could benefit a lot of people, and at the same time, it's kind of a networking thing for us. So like Tommy said, we're definitely going to be focusing the podcast content towards people that know nothing about real estate or know a little bit, and kind of want to get into buying a rental property or even your a primary property. Or maybe you have analysis paralysis and you've just been studying real estate for years, like many people have.
And that's why we picked the name Monopoly Mindset, is to really go back to the first time that anybody's ever seen the power of owning property, right? Or owning houses and getting paid rent.
Yeah, exactly. It really is kind of like a mindset shift of like just in general buy assets and let other people pay off your assets. Similar to the game, you want to buy as many properties as you can, ones that are going to go up in value. For example, nobody wants the railroads because in 30 years, you're only getting that $200 max, right? You want to be able to build and develop it and add equity, put those hotels on Boardwalk, and over time, you're going to see the benefits.
Yeah, and unfortunately in the game of Monopoly, the goal is to get everybody to go bankrupt, right? So you can win. When you start playing real life Monopoly, it's a little bit different of a mindset. You want to be the best landlord that you can. You want to take care of any issues that come up. And if you go about it the right way and you take your maintenance, and you kind of, again, do everything correctly and quickly, you can really manage a property pretty efficiently.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is this kind of negative connotation towards landlords that they're all just rich and they treat their
Slumlords.
yeah, right. And I'm sure that definitely exists. But there's also a lot of small mom and pop investors, a lot that you probably don't even know own real estate. And yes, the end goal is to get wealthy off of it, but that doesn't mean that you can't help somebody and be a good landlord at the same time.
And just like
Um,
in Monopoly, we were playing the other day, we had a lovely 5 hour game of family Monopoly. And the person that won at Monopoly happened to be my mom, Ty's mother in law. And the way that she won was she landed on every property, bought pretty much every property, and then decided to hold every property for all of 3 hours and make no trades.
yeah,
And
she's definitely a buy and hold investor.
and she won. So it shows that in the game of Monopoly and in real life Monopoly, just being a buy and hold investor can do great things for your portfolio.
Yeah, so we were trying to come up with the name on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve. Tommy was visiting us in Maryland, and after like a half hour, we were like, Monopoly is like our favorite game to play, and our wives both absolutely hate it. Um, the biggest fight me and Tommy have ever gotten into was literally over the game of Monopoly. So we we take it very serious, and we thought it was like a perfect kind of real estate related name to come up with. Um,
Yeah.
but Tommy, why don't you tell us a little bit about how many properties you have or your real estate journey so far?
Yeah, I'm up to 10 properties now. I've been buying, throughout the last 7 years. So I have a little bit of experience, and I've actually sold two properties recently, which has been a unique process for me. But with the way the market's been, it seemed to make sense. So I think I have a little bit of knowledge when it comes to real estate investing and look forward to expanding that, sharing everything I know about real estate with anybody that wants to listen, and hopefully encourage people to get started as well. How many properties do you have, Ty?
I currently have four, one including one that me and you bought together in last summer. So I have a primary, a duplex, and then I just purchased a short-term rental that is currently under construction. Will probably be listed by the time this comes out. So yeah, I'm up to four, and super excited to keep growing. But one thing that I really liked that you said was, you know, you don't know everything about real estate, and I think both of us don't really give each other or give ourselves enough credit. But I mean, that is true. We don't know everything about real estate, and we're not going to try and tell somebody with 1,000 units how they should invest. So I guess my point is that we do know a good amount relative to people that know nothing about real estate, right? Like you're going to talk to somebody that doesn't own any property, and they're going to think that you know everything about real estate. And that's kind of who this podcast is intended to. But that being said, take it with a grain of salt. Everyone's situation's different, and yeah, we definitely don't know everything. We just know kind of from our experiences so far. Um, but also, why did we want to do a podcast? I don't know. Your reasoning might be a little different than mine, but
Yeah, I mean, I've always just had a passion for helping people, and I find that real estate is the best investment, just in my extremely biased opinion, and after all the research that I've done throughout my life. And so anything I can do to encourage one more person to buy a rental property and help change their financial picture is of huge value to me. Also, just to let additional people know that they can always call me if they have questions about real estate. I mean, I love talking about real estate. I've been trying to post more on social media about my real estate investing, so stay tuned. I'm definitely going to get better at that. I've kind of been off of social media for a while, and I really just look at trying to post a message and having more conversations with people about real estate in general and trying to help them in their financial picture.
yeah, it's funny how like you go from being the one that's being helped, and you don't really have aspirations to help people, and then I feel like very quickly you end up helping people just like naturally, and it feels really good. Like my cousin just bought his first rental like last or 2 months ago maybe, and I definitely am not taking credit, but I'm sure like just me talking about real estate, you know, he kind of comes from a real estate family, but it does feel good that like I've talked to him about real estate a lot, and then he bought a rental. He called me last night about a question for the software that we use, and I'm like super excited to like help him out, and eventually maybe he'll far surpass me, and then he'll help me out, and it goes back and forth, and everybody that sees success in any realm or industry says like helping people will ultimately also bring you success. And that's kind of another reason that I was very interested in the podcast is, I mean, you can tell the story, but our first property together that we bought actually came from social media. So you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, just in posting a little bit more about real estate, I had a friend from college reach out to me and say, "Hey, I see that you're, still investing in real estate up in the Dallas area. My dad has a property he's potentially looking to sell. Would you be interested in having a conversation with him?" And that's kind of an off-market deal before it hits the general market and goes on to Zillow and everything else. And so we were able to have some conversations, a lot of back and forth. And, at one point we didn't think that we were going to be able to get the deal. We were kind of far apart on numbers. And on top of that, something that I haven't done before and I've been really interested in doing was buying something with seller financing. And throughout that, close personal relationship and being able to talk with him back and forth a lot, we were able to come to an agreement with the seller financing opportunity, which I mean, we'll maybe get into that later and talk more about it, but in general, seller financing is kind of where the person that owns the property sells the property to you, and they're kind of the bank for extended period of time until you're able to get a loan and take over the property yourself. And that was a very easy way for us to add a property under our portfolio. It's the first property that Ty and I got together. And that just came from the power of talking, about what you do for a living, what you do on a day-to-day basis. And that's really what we're trying to do on the podcast is just talk more about real estate, so people know what we do, and ultimately so we can try to help people in one way. And if getting the word out there adds any deals to us, that's just an added bonus, but not something we're directly looking for.
Yeah, and just to touch on the seller financing thing a little bit, we'll probably go into depth about it later about this specific deal, but the main power behind it is that you and the seller can decide how much money you put down. So typically, if you're buying a rental property and you go to the bank and get a loan, they're gonna expect you to put down 20 to 25%. So on a $300,000 house, that's 60 grand plus closing, and that's if you're like us and you have a day job and you have to just work and then save that 60 grand, that can take like years, right? Whereas seller financing, you literally just say to the seller, hey, how much do you want me to put down? And that down payment is kind of security for them in case you foreclose, which it is still like you're defaulting on the loan if you don't pay the seller. You have a contract, like everything is still very legitimate. But in this case, he only wanted $20,000 down, which came out to be like 8% of the deal. So basically, you could, with the same amount of money, buy three properties at 8% down versus one at 20 to 25. Um,
Yeah,
and then,
it's a great strategy, especially for I don't want to say for newer investors because you have to do a lot of research to maybe learn and understand it. But if you can get into it, it's a great way to get into real estate with not a lot of money down, especially in today's market with interest rates being so high. That's another added bonus is we got a lower interest rate. I believe was it 5%?
oh, three.
Three. So we got a three
Yeah,
percent
so
interest rate. So
in
that's something.
2024.
Yeah, that's something probably unheard of for most investors.
Yeah, and the seller, I mean, there's plenty of benefits for the seller to go this route as well. One being if they're an investor and they sell a property, they have to pay capital gains tax. Whereas if they don't sell it this year, they're just collecting a monthly payment. They don't have that huge tax burden for that year. Um,
Yeah, they
but
get a
then
little
just
bit upfront, and then they get interest payments for a couple of years, and then they get the tax burden in 3 to 4 years. But it's a way to kind of plan for it and get some upfront without the huge burden.
exactly. And then just kind of another reason that I'm more interested in the podcast now, or doing a podcast or using social media is for people that know me. I don't think I've posted in like 6 years, and I have deleted the apps for like years. I just don't go on it. But when Tommy asked me to buy that deal with him, he gave me a small ultimatum of like, hey, there's this podcast that I listen to, and they're starting a group, and it's just like a networking group basically. So I'm very skeptical about people charging money online. There's so many like real estate gurus out there. You know, join my group for $50,000 and you're going to be rich next year. And pretty much anybody that's selling get rich quick through real estate, it's not feasible for the average person. It's a long-term play. But anyway, I did end up joining this group. It was not anywhere near $50,000. It was pretty affordable. Um, but they've just really shifted my mindset about social media and how networking in 2025 is basically online now, and marketing is all online. And if you're trying to create a business, which social media is a business, you're kind of falling behind if you don't use social media. Um, and I've just seen the power that the success that they've gotten through social media, and it kind of just feels like you're missing out if you don't use it at all.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, Ty and I both had the mindset of like stay off social media. It's better to be off it in one sense, but seeing that if you want to get your message out there, the word out there, it's better to post. And I know Ty mentioned his cousin, and my best friend Dave Dwayne, his little brother, reached out to me, I believe, from things that he saw me posting on social media about real estate investing. And I got to have, a couple hour conversations with him, and now he's purchased a property out there in Toledo, and that was made me feel great that I got to have conversations with him and talk about real estate, and all that came from posting on social media a little bit about what we're doing. So that's kind of where we're coming from with this, is that we see the value in posting in social media, and so we're going to start trying to be on there, be much more active.
Yeah, and I think like one thing that I always never really understood is like money is a taboo topic, and especially like in the corporate world, like you would never ask your coworker how much they make. But the more that you talk about finances and money, the more you get comfortable with it, and ultimately the more you're gonna make in a sense. Like if you're making 50 grand and you ask your coworker how much they make and they make 80, you're like, wait, what do I need to do to make 80, right? Whereas you were happy with the 50, but now you're like, huh, I need to maybe work a little harder. Or just talking about finances in general, I think it's like the what is it, the rising, I forget the
Yeah, I'm not tracking the word that you're going for there, but in general, I agree. Things that are
rising
tab.
tide rises all boats or something like that.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one, but I don't own a boat, so maybe that's why. Um, but yeah, I completely agree. Finance used to be such a taboo topic, and it's unique for me because I'm an open book. I talk about my portfolio all the time openly, and I always ask questions of people, and I'm like, oh, are they going to be as open as I am? And I think being open about my finances has definitely helped me get to where I'm at today. Not that I'm in a great position by any means. I definitely have goals to be better, but talking about finances has definitely got me here. And I think there needs to be a change from it being a taboo subject where people don't want to talk about it. Because if you're making the 50 grand and you're not asking the guy next to you that's making the 80, you might not ever know that you could make 80 in that same position or have that goal then to get better. And what gets talked about gets measured, gets tracked, and then encourages you to be better. I think every human wants to be better in everything that they do, but if you're not doing anything, you're not going to get better at it, right? So the more you talk about your finances, the better you'll be.
Yeah, and it goes to the saying of like you become the five people that you surround yourself with the most. Like, what are you guys talking about? Is it investing in real estate or is it, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, look at your
Um,
workout community. Not that you haven't worked out a ton in the past, but you joined a workout community, and now you're talking about working out nonstop. And what are you doing now?
yeah, community. It's me and my friends having a competition. But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, just that like it makes us all better. So just talking about it and putting yourself out there is kind of the goal. Um, but so Tommy, how did you initially get into real estate or find out about it?
Yeah, I just always had a knack for personal finance. I mean, I sold cars when I was in college, and I think that really helped me learn a lot about people's financial pictures and just always curious as to why they couldn't afford a car or why their credit was so bad. And then I was in college, and maybe a lot of people had some help. I was paying for my car by myself in college, and I was paying my rent by myself in college. So I had to work at the pizza shop and make money to pay my rent. And I'm like, wow, $250 a month for rent's expensive, and there's four of us paying that same amount. And so this guy's making $1,000 a month. Like, that's crazy. And so my mind just always stuck and thought about how cool it was that this guy was making that kind of money. And then I moved into a different house a couple years later, and I was paying $500 a room. And there's four rooms downstairs, four upstairs. Like, this guy's making $4,000 a month. Like, this is absurd. And so listening to Dave Ramsey and then hearing all the people that were real estate investors, I just thought it was like the best way to kind of start a business to make additional money on top of your W-2 income. I found bigger pockets and really just fell in love with the idea of being a real estate investor, owning a property and having a mortgage that might be, let's say, 1,500 and collecting rent that was 2,000. Like, wow, making $500 a month. Not that that's accurate because there's a lot more you need to do with that $500 from a savings perspective, but to get started, that's like what I saw and I kind of fell in love with, and that's what really helped me get started in real estate. It was like an additional way to make extra money from a monthly cash flow perspective.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the pizza shop working there, and I don't know, I don't think this was the one that you worked at, but you actually sold a property to a guy that owned the pizza shop right down the road, and part of your deal was a verbal agreement that he'll give you free pizza for life. So if you're not really into real estate for the investments side, at least you can get free pizza for life. Um,
It is only free slices. I don't want to take advantage and like go for free. I did put free slices in the contract. So
oh,
every
it's
time,
actually written into the contract.
at least it was texted to the guy. I should probably screenshot it so I have it. But we've never had any issues. If anything, I've always felt awkward. I'm like, I don't want to go in there and be like, yo, let me get a free slice. But in retrospect, I was telling Sarah because she started to feel bad about it the other day. I'm like, Sarah, we gave the guy, I think it was roughly like $8,000 off of like the price that we really wanted for the property from what we sold it for. Just it was kind of a buyer's market, not really a seller's market when we sold. And so like I'm gonna get my $8,000 worth of pizza one way or another.
I mean,
You know,
that's
for
4,000 slices
yeah,
that you
so
could get.
we're at like, I don't know, 1% of that right now. But yeah,
Maybe
we're
we should have called the pepperoni pizza podcast.
the
But
Slice podcast.
yeah. Um but yeah, I mean I probably have a pretty similar story. I guess one thing that we haven't mentioned yet is Tommy's my brother-in-law, so I did marry his sister. I've actually known Tommy way before me and Danielle ever started dating. He was like best friends with my brother in like 7th grade. So it's kind of funny. They stopped hanging out, but it came full circle where 15 years after I met Tommy, who would just come over to my house, hanging out with my brother, now we're kind of back to doing like family trips together and everything.
Yeah, and I played football with Ty's oldest brother, Brad, and so I've known the Brown family for a very long time. So it was kind of full circle, and it's kind of unique that, friends that you grew up with are now family forever. So it's really cool.
Yeah, so that being said, I didn't really have a choice whether to talk to Tommy or not, so it was kind of forced. But ultimately, he's the one that really got me into real estate. So I guess my backstory into real estate is that I come from a like very 401k heavy mindset family. My dad works for Vanguard. He's worked there for like I don't know, almost 30 years. So that's obviously a 401k or an investment company. And all throughout college, I just had this mindset of like, if I put this much money away into a 401k, it's going to grow until to this much. And when I'm 65, I'm going to be set. And there's definitely nothing wrong with that, right? If you max out your 401k or whatever, put money in early. And I'm still doing this, but you put money in early. By the time you retire, like you're gonna have a good cushion and have a good retirement. And that was really appealing to me in college. I'm an electrical engineer in my day job, and I've kind of always had this mindset that I wanted to become a CEO of some company, or like I want to make a ton of money, become a CEO. Like look up, the company that I worked for the first year out of college, the CEO made like $20 million that year, and it's like who wouldn't want to do that? And very quickly, like 6 months after graduating of me working, like my goals just completely shifted. And one thing that I didn't realize is those CEOs are working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and they're in their 50s or 60s. And it very quickly, I was like, what are you going to do with all this money when you're working, you know, or you're not really spending time with your family or your kids because you're just working the whole time. So right away I was like, that's not the route that I want to take. And also like I think most people that don't love their day job, I don't want to wait till I'm 65 until my retirement account like kicks in or whatever, 59, whatever it is. Um, So it's like, yeah, you can have all this money in your 401k, but you can't access it for 40 years, and you're basically forced to do a job that you don't love for like 50% of your life, and then you're 65, and then you can't go skiing or wakeboarding or whatever you want to do with all this money that you've saved up. So that being said, Tommy kind of hit me up one day and was like, "Yeah, instead of like renting, I'm gonna buy a property and rent it out to my roommates." And that was really like my first introduction to really anybody buying real estate that I know. Um, I've heard of people buying real estate, but I always just thought of it as like that's like those people must just be loaded, or like it was super risky. Like, what if something breaks? And Tommy was like, I don't know, it's like 5 grand to fix. Like, like it's not the end of the world, but I'm making, like you said, $500 a month. So I quickly shifted from like the Dave Ramsey podcast, which again I was all about Dave Ramsey. Like, I'm going
We all
to
were.
yeah, and to be fair, I think what he says applies to 99.9% of the country,
For
and to
sure.
everybody. Like, live below your means and don't take out huge debt. Um, but my mindset shifted a little bit where I thought, I'm gonna graduate college, I'm gonna pay off my car, and I'm gonna just literally buy everything cash. But he also says buy real estate cash, which it's not feasible for most people. Like, what am I gonna work my entire life and then buy my first rental property at 40 when I finally save up 300 grand? It just doesn't really make sense. And also, you're not getting the same return when you buy a place cash. Like, one of the most powerful things about real estate is that you can leverage and you can put down 3.5% to buy a property. And over time, you're seeing the benefit on the entire 100% value. You're going to see it go up in value, but you only own 3%. And so leverage can be a very powerful, risky, but it is a very powerful
I
tool.
mean,
Um,
Dave's phenomenal. He's done great, like you said, for 99% of America. I think they should just listen to him and learn a little bit of financial literacy, and it would do wonders. When it comes to real estate investing, I definitely don't agree with a lot of what Dave says, but where he's coming from, a lot of people might not know Dave's story, but he ended up going bankrupt by owning a ton of real estate and kind of going through a real estate crash and the way the banks demanded all of his money. It's a very odd situation that doesn't happen very often. He had a lot of unique loans. And so, in my opinion, that's what
yeah, I mean,
skews his mindset. But he's also right in everything that he says. But he's very risk averse because of that. Where and that's not super risky to buy a house with 20% down or 5% down or whatever, and leverage it. So what Ty's point is, it's not very risky, but Dave Ramsey is extremely risk averse, and that's where his mindset comes
yeah,
from.
it definitely seems like he's using his personal story, which I highly doubt that he was buying rentals with 25% down. I'm sure he was doing very risky stuff with hard money, extremely high interest rate loans, adjustable. He was probably in the middle of flips and the market, crashed. But you can set yourself up to survive a crash. You just have to, you have to manage the risk level. Um, and I'm somewhere naturally. I am a very not risky person. Again, 401k, just put money in it every month. Nothing really bad could ever
Ty's
happen.
playing this off like this is a very quick decision he made, just to let everybody know. This was almost a year and a half of debates that we would have till like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning about trying to, not saying change Ty's mindset, but just open his mindset to the way that I thought about investing or the way I thought about real estate. So it did take a lot of time to kind of grasp that concept.
Yeah, and even to this day, I do give you credit for. I've been like trying to become more risky, just because all entrepreneurship that it involves risk. You're not gonna like, working a corporate job is cushy. It's not risky. And I've been really focusing on trying to make more calculated risks. Emphasis on calculated. Like, I'm not going to go buy Bitcoin because I want to get rich quick. Like, that's a huge risk. But yeah, so long story short, my mindset shifted. I started listening to Bigger Pockets like most people when Brandon Turner and David Green were on it. I missed the Josh Dorkin days, but I basically just listened to Bigger Pockets for like 3 years, trying to save up the money to buy my first property. And I gained so much knowledge in that amount of time. I wasn't really a book person. I read one book, I think, or two actually. I mean, Rich Dad Poor Dad, which if you haven't read that book, it's the every time I hear any podcast or interview and they say like, how'd you get into real estate? Any books? Literally 99% of people say Rich Dad Poor Dad. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's not really real estate specific, but it's just investing and the power of entrepreneurship and investing early in compound interest. And
And listening to those podcasts is kind of what helped us decide that we want to get started because, no disrespect, they've all been great. We've learned a ton, but they've all gotten so large that, in our opinion, the investors that they're getting from having such a large platform is phenomenal. But from the average investor, like even who Ty and I are, a lot of them feel way above where we're at. If they have 50 plus units or 1,000 units, and so we're really looking to create a podcast that starts with the average investor, the initial investor, because that's what we think is the most value. Once you get started, then your mind can take you somewhere else. You can come up with your own path and you can grow that way. But the hardest part about real estate investing is just getting started. And that's really what we want to do.
yeah, one thing that you mentioned is it is very hard to listen to somebody with 1,000 units, and even though the concepts are essentially the same in real estate, like whether you're buying 1,000 unit or a single unit, the concepts are the same, but it is hard to kind of get motivated and get like realistic advice from this person. And that's why we kind of find that people that are 1 to 2 steps ahead of you are much better like mentors or people to listen to, right? Because they're where you want to be, but they're not so far that it's just like overwhelming. Like, oh, I'm never gonna have 1,000 units. Um, and then really just at the end of the day, one thing that I've learned is you like I listen to I don't know hundreds of hours of podcasts, and I'm a math guy, so like I know all the numbers for loans and that's but at the end of the day, you're really gonna get 99% of experience from just doing it. Um, and just doing it is the hardest part. I remember the first rental that I bought, it was a duplex, so it was like one main water line going in, and then it split off. Well, the contractor, I had a guy living in one side. The contractor shut off the main water line to both houses, and there was a guy living there, and he texted me. He was like, "Hey, my water's not working," and it's like it's so simple, but I've never heard of that on a podcast. Like people, they're not really giving you their very specific problems, and everyone's problems are going to be different. And I remember texting Tommy. I was like, "Hey, this is obviously simple. I just call the contractor and like." Get him to turn the main line back on. But it's something that until you actually get into that situation, like you're not going to hear that on a podcast. So
Yeah, and
at
that's
the end
something
of the
that we're
day,
going to try to add to our podcast as well. I mean, as much as we want to have guests and smaller investors, Ty and I plan on talking about our real estate investing journey a lot more individually, like maybe some of the topics that I'm going through on a daily basis. And I have a property manager now, but maybe just managing that relationship or some of the issues that come up in my own real estate investing journey. And also talking about what Ty's been going through. Ty's a little bit more private than me, so it'll be a little bit of me trying to pry some information out of him. But we do plan on talking a lot more about our individual stories and what we're dealing with on a day to day basis because that's something that we always want to hear out of more podcasts. And for whatever reason, they stick to guests and larger things. And so I always found a ton of interest in what is that person dealing with on a day to day basis. And that's one thing we also want to do a couple episodes about and talk about our investing story so people can follow us along as well. So kind of wrapping it up, like what people can expect from us. We're going to try and give weekly episodes. We're going to have some guests that are going to be smaller investors, just like Ty and I. I mean, we might have the occasional bigger investor, but we really plan on speaking to smaller investors and going over their initial property, how they got that first deal, how they might have been scared at first, but they talk through it. That's really what we want to talk about, is just how to get started investing in real estate, that it's really not nearly as scary as you might think. The average person, I think if everybody hears a loud noise, they're going to jump because it's programmed in us to be scared. Just the human aspect of us, or animal aspect of us. Hear a loud noise, you jump. And I think when people think of real estate investing, they jump, they get scared. And so we're really trying to start a podcast to talk through that, to get people to not be scared to start investing in real estate. So with all that being said, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.